find you very rude. The Novympia channel is made possible by our gorgeous patrons who get access to the most unappealing crap you'll find anywhere on the whole internet.
Cue the snafu!
It is an unseasonably warm and sunny day today. Which
it is a bit hot, isn't it?
Doesn't make for the best setting for the long-awaited sequel.
Didn't stop you wearing a scarf either.
Well, I thought it might be a bit blustery later on. Might be a good effect. We're here today for the long-awaited sequel of, what is it, girls?
The Grim Tour.
The Grim Tour of Bournemouth, Part 2. We did the original Grim Tour in 2020, so it's 2 years, almost to the day, that we did this. And it's probably one of our most rewatched videos. People have requested we do a sequel to this for so long. So here we are, we're going to be serving up another slew of horrendous stories that happened on our doorstep. We've got some spooky ghost shit. I think the murders are probably even more horrendous than last time, if that's possible, Shah.
Yeah.
The first leg of our tour begins in Parkstone in Poole on a commercial street called Ashley Road. The shop we're looking for has obviously changed considerably in the last 40 years, but we're able to park up pretty much right outside to talk about the murder of Claire Stagg.
So this first one, the murder of 9-year-old Claire Stagg, it's actually a friend of ours, Danny. Her mum was friends with this little girl when they were younger. I kind of heard about it a few years ago, forgot about it, couldn't really find it again because there's very little information on it actually, but she mentioned something about her mum's friend being murdered on Ashley Road and I could not believe it. I was like, oh my god, I've been trying to find that for years. So on Sunday the 8th of September 1985, a 37-year-old Bournemouth man named David Adams lured 9-year-old Claire Stagg into his toy shop on Ashley Road with the promise of showing her some of the toys he sold. The shop is located about half a mile east of the shop where John Green would be murdered 6 years later, whose case we covered in the original Grim Tour. Claire Stagg was said to have been captivated by the toys in his shop and had immediately started playing with them when she entered. She had been to the shop numerous times beforehand with friends. She was described as being 4 foot 2 inches tall, slim and with brown shoulder-length hair. She had been wearing a pink t-shirt, pale blue shorts and roller skates when she left home on her own on the Sunday in 1985. While inside and ensuring no one was around, David Adams sexually assaulted Claire after luring her into the back room before strangling her to death with a strip of blue cloth. When police questioned David inside the shop, he was standing just feet away from her body. He told police that he last saw Claire when she left the shop to look for her friend, a story he later repeated in a televised interview. He finally broke down during further police questioning and confessed to the murder. Police discovered Claire's body trussed up in a plastic bag inside a child's pedal car box. They also discovered that he used the shop to house an extensive collection of pornographic magazines and videos alongside photos, apparently taken by Adams from the shop, of young women passing by in the street. A Crown Court judge described the killing as monstrous. The court also heard that his wife had just given birth to a girl. David Adams was convicted of the murder of Claire Stagg and was jailed for life on the 11th of February 1986. He had been jailed for 4 years in 1968 for the attempt of a similar crime.
I understand that it was the best part of 40 years ago, but there is very little information about this case. It probably wouldn't have come up on our radar had you not had some kind of personal connection to it, Shah.
Very strange that there's such little information. You would think a little white girl going missing in a toy shop is quite a sensational story.
Yeah.
You would think that the media would have hopped on that and that would have really done the rounds. I'm very surprised. It's also kind of creepy how the branding for this kebab shop is still kind of childlike. It's still, if you didn't read English, that could easily be a toy store logo.
And it was out in a back room, I think, which would have been that surely.
So entrance to the back room.
That looks like it's, just in the flats.
It looks like it may have even been converted or something. Is there anyone in this shop right now?
No,
I think so. So we were just wondering, what the actual laws are on having to disclose to potential buyers if somebody has died previously on the property. And Glenn just found something.
Yeah, it is a legal requirement under the Consumer Protection from Unfair Trading Regulations that estate agents and property vendors alike have to disclose any information that could either affect or decrease the value of the property. This does include both murder and suicide in the property.
There might be like a statute of limitations though, something, I mean that was in the 80s,
there might
that
be.
would still affect it. But
Well, I don't know, I guess because if it was a big enough, I mean obviously that didn't get the media attention we thought it would do, but if something did, then maybe they would still have to.
There's no one in there at the moment. Would you have the nerve to go in and ask them if they're aware that the child was killed in their back room?
No.
I don't know if you'd want them to know. Would you want to know that information?
Probably not.
We're just on to our next location, and I did a little recap on part 1 and Tollard Court, because obviously I wasn't in it. And I turned around to Greg and I was like, oh my god, I worked on this property when I redone the roof, and it completely freaked me out because I was just like, I had no idea that there was like a murder had gone on there, or some sort of kidnapping, was it? I think it was.
Which one was Tollard Court? Is it the pink
she was
one?
murdered, but it wasn't at
Tollard Court.
I think
No.
She just stayed there.
Spooky, spooky.
Having driven about 5 minutes east of Parkstone, we arrived at a place called Coy Pond to discuss our second case. Coy Pond is a beauty spot in the affluent Bournemouth area of Westbourne. To locals, it's also known as an area haunted by a ghost in a bloody Macintosh who, when alive, perpetrated the murder of Arthur Charles Dean.
So we are now walking to, I believe this entire area is called Coy Pond, but we're actually going to the pond. There's a river, I believe this is the Bourne River where Bournemouth gets its name from.
We're just going to follow it and the pond is down there.
It's a cute little bridge.
See, Bournemouth can be quite picturesque if you find the right spots. They are few and far between.
Ain't that the truth? Oh look, there's a fish.
Bournemouth Gardens carries its fair share of ghost stories, with ominous figures said to be spotted walking down the long central path. We'll be heading further into the gardens later on to discuss these sightings, but to the top of the gardens lies Coy Pond, the scene of one of Bournemouth's most tragic murders. On a winter's day in 1954, Carl Ivan Domney Frost, a 16-year-old boy, brutally murdered 64-year-old Arthur Charles Dean. The boy hacked the man to death using the same scythe that Dean had been using to cut grass with. He calmly walked home in the blood-stained Macintosh, but was later arrested and sentenced to a mere 3 years in prison. The reason for his short sentence was down to the boy suffering severe mental health issues. He took his own life shortly after his sentence, but it's said that the ghost of Frost in the raincoat has been sighted near the Coy Pond ever since. I feel like I've heard of this story before, where like people have seen ghosts and things like that around Coy Pond before.
The thing I find really weird about it though is it's not the ghost of the man who died.
Yeah.
They say it's the ghost of the killer, which is weird. I mean, if you're
That
going
would
to...
imply that this particular, I mean, was it the only murder that he did?
I think so, yeah.
Well, it was obviously very, very significant to him if he's hanging
think it's
around the site where it happened.
The fact that he walked home in a blood-stained Macintosh that's just so like brazen that people
Yeah.
just find that the most disturbing. And the fact that, yeah, he did it calmly. Were you, as someone who grew up here, like, were you told about like a ghost near Coy Pond? Do you have any kind of... You have no kind of...
I never heard of it. I've vaguely heard something about it on that Memories of Old Poole and Bournemouth site, but
Yeah.
I've not heard anything else about it. Like, it was the first time I'd heard of it. I used to come here when I was little a lot. Never heard anything then.
I didn't realise there were actually koi in this pond because it's not spelt like that, is there? I just saw a massive one go past, but I wasn't fast enough to get it on camera.
Yeah,
that's
it is
huge as
spelled
well.
wrong, isn't it?
Not unlike the murder of Claire Stagg, there's very little concrete information we can find outside of what we've been able to gather from locals, but it is thought that Arthur resided in one of these houses, and that his killer would have taken his slow walk down this path.
So we've done Coy Pond, and literally a stone's throw away, we're going to be driving for a minute. We're going to be entering Ipswich Road and going to the home of a woman who, it's probably one of the more infamous missing person cases in the UK. It's quite well known.
Yeah, there's a few like documentaries and videos that have covered this
There
one.
was a Netflix presentation. I think ITV did one. We're going to be parking up at the former home of a lady called Carole Packman. There aren't many people in Bournemouth who haven't heard of Carole Packman. There's a location we head to a bit later on that's so unnerving we just had to bail, but I have to say second to that in terms of eeriness is Ipswich Road and this lady's former home.
What I find interesting is that I think it's now flats. It's there.
It's a very isolated road, and the houses around here, I imagine, would be incredibly expensive. Is it Shard? It's that one there, isn't it?
Yeah.
This one literally with the black car.
Oh no, the one. The
I
other
think
side.
it's that one.
Because the other one's a block of flats now.
Okay, so behind us is the former home of a lady called Carole Packman, and I'm going to try and get through this quite quickly. Veronica Carole Ann Packman, née Thornton. She was a 40-year-old British woman who disappeared from her home in Bournemouth, England, in June of 1985. So her husband, a man called Russell Causley, was found guilty of her murder, but the thing that this case is known for is that her body was never found. So it's not the only case of someone being convicted with the absence of a body being found, but they are quite rare. So it's what this case
Was it
is
not the
kind
first
of.
one?
Wasn't the first one, and it's not the only one either, but it is very rare. Carole disappeared from the family home in June 1985. Her daughter Samantha, then 16, discovered a very short note in the home, purportedly from Carole, saying that she had had enough of her life and was leaving, wanting nothing further to do with either her or Russell.
My mother, she was quite an introverted person. My father is the complete opposite. A lot more gregarious, a lot more controlling, a lot more the orchestrator of as to how he wanted things to be in the house, what he wanted to do.
None of her personal items were missing from the home. While family and friends were concerned that she was missing, Russell continued to assert that Carole had left of her own free will. Russell's mistress Patricia had moved into the family home by this time. Russell told his daughter that he didn't want her in the home anymore, so she left and slept rough under Bournemouth Pier. Sometime later, a blonde lady walked into Bournemouth police station claiming to be Carole, saying that she was listed as missing but just didn't wish to be found. The identity of the woman has never been confirmed. I guess some people theorise that it was Patricia, maybe in a wig, but it's never been clarified who that woman was.
Which sounds ridiculous, but Carole's hair was always immaculately blown out and set, so I feel like a wig might not be too outrageous.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just irritating that nobody bothered to check right then and there who that was, because that would be pretty telling.
You'd think you'd ask for some ID, like photo ID.
I mean, this is quite recent as well, in the grand scheme of things. 1985 is not that long ago.
Yeah, but
40 years.
the police have always been pretty incompetent, haven't they?
The reason that he began to really be the main suspect was because he was caught faking his death off the coast of Guernsey, disappearing from a yacht in the middle of the night as part of an insurance scam. This was 1993, so this is 8 years later. He was convicted and jailed for fraud in 95. After the trial, Dorset police re-investigated the disappearance and he was convicted of her murder in 96. But his conviction is one of only a short list of examples of convictions for murder without the discovery of a body.
That's wild that it was like 11 years later.
Yeah. And without ever finding her as well, so they must have really come a cropper of a lot more information. A detective, Tony Knott, he stated that two prisoners who spoke with Causley while serving his sentence for fraud came forward saying that he boasted of getting rid of his wife by burial in a cemetery or disposal in acid. So various ways. Fancy saying that? Why would you bother saying that to someone? Because you just want to boast that you got away with
that
it.
happens so often, doesn't it? Because they can't help themselves. The fact that they got away with it means that nobody knows that they did it, and they want some credit, they want some attention. They cannot help themselves.
And Russell was said to be all the time seeking reassurance that if the police can't find the body, then he's going to be okay.
There you go.
Causley and Patricia were arrested in connection with the murder of Mrs. Packman. Although police carried out extensive searches of the property, which is the one just behind us, searching for his wife's remains, they never found her. They found nothing. So he was charged with her murder. In 1996, she wasn't charged with anything, the girlfriend. So he's made news again recently because in October, so right now, this month, he's going to have the first public parole hearing in British history. So is it going to be streamed, is it?
Yeah, the first ever, they've let cameras in the courtroom for the first time ever.
Yeah, so it's a public parole hearing, and the daughter, who has campaigned for years to keep her father in prison, called the decision momentous. So he's going to be in the news again. So if you're from the UK and you've never heard of this case, there's a good chance you might hear about it in the news presently. But this was her house. It looks to be a pretty substantial house. I mean, that looks like it would be worth millions. It's very, very eerie, this road.
It is, yeah.
There's a few roads like this in Bournemouth where there are huge trees which go over the road, very kind of like enclosed and shut off. Especially in this area, Westbourne area. Not only are there some really huge, old, creepy houses, but there are some huge trees as well. So that is set away from the road, and there's some pretty big trees around it. I imagine it's worth quite a lot. I don't know who lives there now, though. I wonder if it's still in the family or not.
There are vehicles there, though, so it's occupied.
Yeah.
Well, I do wonder if
They
it's
put the
also been
bins out.
turned into flats, because I think it's so big and
I
there's so much
wouldn't have
parking.
thought so, Shah. There is a single black bin there.
Yeah.
It's definitely...
I wouldn't have thought so.
It's like, I can see like a washing line as well at the back.
Yeah, I don't think that's flats.
I don't think there's a single member of his family that defend him. I think they're all staunchly against him.
You can't turn the page of that chapter and go, you know what, I've put that book down now, I've finished it, I understand what happened, and I can slowly adjust and come to terms and come to grips with that and, and accept it, come to that acceptance point. We don't have any of that, so for us, it's constantly evolving. The story just gets worse and worse, and as it gets worse and worse, it twists and twists more.
Causley is currently imprisoned at HM Prison Lewes. Carole's grandson Neil has stated that he is looking to produce a TV drama on the murder and that he intends on publishing a book about Carole in the future. When we left Ipswich Road, we continued to drive east to reach central Bournemouth and the town hall.
There's pages of this that's scattered all through the bush.
Oh, look.
Someone has disintegrated an old book right by the town hall.
Really weird.
Down here.
It's pages scattered.
It's been done like page by page. And it's like an old book too.
As a southern seaside town, Bournemouth saw its share of war action in both World War I and II. It's also a place that people suffering with unknown debilitations at the time were sent to heal, and so many of the ghosts and tragedies of Bournemouth are grounded in the first half of the 19th century.
Before we walked up to our next spot, we came across Bournemouth Town Hall, which is said by many to be haunted by the ghosts of victims of war. Built in 1885, the building was later used as a hospital during World War I. Among the many glimpses of paranormal activity sighted here is the vision of a nurse who roams the corridors and is most often seen in the autumn months. In the basement, it is said that a soldier can be seen drinking from a sink. Specifically to the sighting of the soldier is that he is a creature of habit. He seems to appear here only once a year toward the end of October. The basement isn't home to just the soldier either. It's also the place where 3 young boys can sometimes be seen waving from a window. It's said that the 3 brothers were locked in the basement as punishment for being naughty, but died when a fire broke out in the building. The most elaborate story is that of the headless Maharaja, draped in Indian uniform, who is said to sit on a chair on the 4th floor. Over the past century, there have also been sights of phantom horses and carriages, and a resident ghostly cat who wanders the grounds.
Life is long, like a medicine.
Crossing over the square, we head up Avenue Road to the site of our next story, the Bournemouth Tramway crash. So in the 1900s, Bournemouth had a tram system, and all of the roads here in the high streets had trams going down them. And there was a really horrific crash here in 1908. So this is the Bournemouth Tramway accident. It happened during an era when trams operated between Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, which was at the time in the county of Hampshire. On the evening of May 1st, the driver of tramcar number 72 lost control of the vehicle and crashed onto the then private gardens of Fairlight Glen House, 8 Avenue Road. We're on Avenue Road now, so we think it must have been just behind us. This private house no longer exists.
Yeah, it was somewhere along this side because we think that the tram crashed down
that way, and this side is all commercial. I don't imagine it would have been there.
The driver, William Wilton, scrambled to rescue passengers despite being injured himself. However, this was not going to limit the large number of casualties. Many passengers were sitting on the open-top deck of the tram, and sadly 7 people died and 26 others were seriously injured. At the time, it was considered the most serious tramway accident in the whole of the UK. Today, the location is just in front of the cenotaph in Central Gardens, which we're going to go down and have a look at down there.
So the tram would have been making its way down here, and at this corner here, where this truck is going right now, it would have been going too fast. The brakes failed, and it shot over there. And we're going to go now down into the gardens to figure out exactly where it would have landed. It would have ordinarily gone all the way down into the square. I don't know why it's called the square. It's not a square.
No.
It may well have been.
Well, because there's 4 high streets that come off it, isn't there?
Yeah, maybe.
There's a large war cenotaph in the gardens, and although we had a pretty solid idea where the crash site was, we weren't sure if there was a memorial to the people who died in the accident, so we set about looking at the numerous plaques that can be found here. However, after scanning a wide search area, we concluded that there isn't one.
Yeah, so when it says cenotaph, I'm pretty sure it just means the war memorial, and there actually isn't a memorial for the tram crash, which is so weird. We've been looking around.
Not a memorial, there's like a tree and a plaque planted for the Queen's silver wedding. There's a tree for Diana. There's a tree for like when the mayor had like an affair with his cousin's sister's daughter. There's nothing for like actually people that have died.
So although there is no actual commemorative plaque or marker for where this happened, that we can find, it must be in front of the cenotaph is where those people are walking right now. It's basically on the other side of that. And we were standing before, just on top of that hill, is where it would have come over that bank down into. So just here will be the spot where the tram came over that bank.
Yeah,
which
this general area
at one point in time would have been a private garden. No, the photos aren't that in depth.
The old tram station building is still standing in the centre of the square, but today it is a cafe, only a stone's throw from the site of the Bournemouth tramway crash.
So Bournemouth Gardens is to our right, where we saw the location of the tram crash. We're going to return there later on when it's a bit darker to talk about a weird phenomena where people see men in black coats and black hats in a different part of the gardens, which is a weird kind of culty thing. And we're going to drive now to the Lansdowne so we can see the former location of the Metropole Hotel, which was bombed in World War II. The Metropole Hotel, initially called the Palace Hotel, was opened in August 1893. With 120 bedrooms, a majestic entrance of polished red granite pillars, and a large octagonal domed peak, it was considered luxury accommodation. Although it was repaired following the bombing of 1943, it was later demolished for work to begin on offices for the Royal London Assurance Company, and the building as it presently stands was opened in 1958. It's now used for office space, while the ground floor is a KFC. So this is the Lansdowne roundabout. This big building up here, the Royal London House, was a good 70, 80 years ago the Metropole Hotel, which we'll get a better look at in a minute when we get out. And the KFC underneath actually made a very brief appearance in the last Grim tour, because Charmaine would not stop telling us to put it in, because that's where Jade Goody's father passed away. So if it looks familiar, it's because you've seen the Grim tour #1.
Fancy us putting that in, but not the actual, like, really piece of hit. Like,
can you imagine that location is actually something worthwhile talking about? And we're turning now into Cotlands Road, which there are 2 things that happened in this road. It's not even a very big road. 3 if you include Nova and I getting beaten up because we in fact used to live in the now burnt out apartment above this restaurant. That used to be our front door there, that overgrown Jumanji situation.
Walking up to the site of the former Metropole Hotel, we couldn't ignore the old apartment building that Olympia and I had lived in about 10 years ago. The apartment was destroyed along with several others in August of 2020. A huge fire engulfed much of the building and also forced several businesses to relocate. The cause of the fire is still unknown. Our bedroom was on the far right, our friend Megan lived in the centre room and the living room was on the left. It's also the place where we were attacked by a group of men on our doorstep in the early hours as we were coming home. Turn the corner, walked up here, that overgrown door there was our front door, and it would have been maybe from about the corner we were suddenly followed by a group of people, and they followed us down here, and it would have been about here. Megan tapped me on the shoulder and said, "We're being followed, like there's people coming after us." I remember walking up these stairs and I had my key in the door before like somebody punched me, and then I was this side of the railing with people attacking me, and I think Olympia was this side, and that is where the CCTV camera was that apparently didn't catch anything. But that was exactly where that assault happened. And now the building's burnt down and is derelict. Many people seem to have suffered tragic fates in this part of town, not least the people staying in and around the Metropole Hotel during the German raid of May 23rd, 1943.
So, the Metropole Hotel that we just drove past, we're going to go up there in a second. In May of 1943, Bournemouth people heard aircraft engines, looked up to see a squadron of German planes flying low in the early afternoon sky. Within 5 minutes, the enemy bombers would destroy 59 surrounding buildings, including the Metropole, and claim at least 130 lives. Direct hits on the Metropole and Central hotels would take the heaviest toll on human life. The Focke-Wulf 190 aircraft had taken off from Cannes less than half an hour earlier, 20 of them heading for Hastings and 26 to Bournemouth. The air raid siren sounded at 12:54 and the planes came over in Hengistbury Head and Southbourne, flying at just 50 feet. They were spotted by radar on the Isle of Wight, but there was not enough time for British fighters at Warmwell and Ibsley to be scrambled. The first bomb fell at Cotlands Road, where the Shamrock and Rambler coach station was hit. The planes fanned out and dropped a total of 25 bombs, of which 21 or 22 are believed to have exploded. 59 buildings were destroyed, and another 3,422 damaged. The Metropole Hotel contained hundreds of Allied servicemen, mainly Canadian but also Australian and American. Many were having lunch, while some were luckily away on training. The bomb which destroyed the Metropole Hotel caused horrific casualties. Among the lucky ones to survive were some 34 airmen on the upper floors who were rescued by firefighters. The hotel's stoker, 76-year-old David Gear, was in the boiler room and managed to switch off the electricity and damp down the fires. His action averted an explosion which would have cost even more lives. A serving officer and a Bournemouth housewife who died together at the Central Hotel were conducting an affair. Their families refused to accept their identification, and they were initially buried at the Bournemouth North Cemetery before being exhumed and reburied in their separate towns. The force of the bomb was so powerful that one man's body was only discovered weeks later on the bell tower located opposite, and only when seagulls had started circling. We're going to head to a graveyard after this. It's kind of a war memorial cemetery where a lot of people who died in this bombing will be buried, including a lady called Kathleen Jeffrey, who was born in 1905. She perished in the bombing, and for a very long time her daughter, who was a lady called Pamela Moriarty, she's written a book about this called Finding My Mother, Finding Myself. This lady wrote this book about trying to find out who her mother was. She didn't know. Her mother disappeared from her life when she was 7, and she went on a quest to try and find her, and she ended up here, and sadly learned that the reason her mother disappeared is because she died in the Metropole Hotel bombing. And Kathleen is actually buried in this graveyard that we're going to go to, so we're going to see if we can try and find her grave. There's also a commemorative plaque just in the centre of Lansdowne by the roundabout we just went past. And that was put up not that long ago, was it, that plaque? Didn't you say that you...
I was at college, because my hairdressing college is actually on that roundabout.
And I remember going out for lunch and the ceremony was happening where they installed the plaque there. I remember that the mayor of Bournemouth was there and there was a crowd of people. Among the survivors attending was Vernon Masterman, who was trapped in rubble when a bomb demolished his streets as he ran for shelter with his mother. I found it very moving, much more so for those of us who were there at the time, he said. I was only 4, but I still remember it vividly.
Leaving the site of the former Metropole, we then headed back up the road to where we had parked the car. So we're just here now outside the job centre on Cotlands Road. Our old apartment is over there. And this was the location of
the last case in the area, the murder of Irishman Samuel Graham Williamson, who was killed and his body set alight right behind where I'm standing on 10th of August 1988. He had been strangled with a leather belt, punched, and his head hit against some concrete posts in which was described as a frenzied attack. His body had been burnt almost beyond recognition. The police said that he was almost unrecognisable when he was found. He was found in the grounds of the DHSS offices in Cotlands Road, which still serves as a job centre but has since been rebuilt. The police said that they had been puzzled by the lack of motive. They appealed for help from motorbike enthusiasts that might have been in the Bournemouth area at the time of the murder, as well as for anyone who recognised the belt that Samuel Williamson had been strangled with, describing it as a biker's belt.
On the murder of Graham Williamson in Bournemouth, Crime Watch viewers saved police wasting hundreds of man-hours trying to trace the belt that the killer had left behind. Police had thought the belt was handmade and therefore very distinctive. Now we know that thousands of them were made around 8 years ago, so the emphasis of the inquiry changed, and now, though not directly because of the programme, a man has been charged with murder.
A man was charged with his murder in 1988, but the case against him was dropped due to lack of evidence. The same man, Francis MacDonald from Glasgow, was rearrested and charged in 2005 after the police carried out a cold case review and found his DNA amongst the material found under Samuel Williamson's fingernails. The man said that he had had a severe drinking problem at the time Samuel Williamson was murdered and that he had remembered little about the events around the murder, but said that he was sure that he would have recollected seeing Samuel murdered or having been involved if he had been.
Driving for 3 minutes northeasterly, we then headed to Northcote Road in an area called Springbourne. We're looking for the location of an unsolved murder from 1971. A couple who had been researching details of their ancestors discovered that this brutal Bournemouth killing was at the heart of their family tree.
So we've left Lansdowne, we've left Cotlands Road, and we're now heading not too much further up towards Springbourne. And we're going to be hopefully ducking into a road just to the right of this bar here.
At the roundabout, take the second exit onto Holdenhurst Road.
And we're going to find, again, I don't know that the same building is there anymore, but we're going to go to the location of a murder that happened in the 70s, I think, and it's an unsolved murder of an elderly lady called Rose Lively.
Turn left, then turn right onto Northcote Road.
Michael and Sylvia Berman were shocked to find out details of Rose Lively's violent death and have now voiced their hope that the murder will one day be solved. Spinster Miss Lively, who was stabbed to death in her Northcote Road home in 1971, was Michael's great aunt. He said, "We were not close to that part of the family, and I vaguely remember being told about her death and hearing about it on the news." Rose Lively was 73 years old when she was stabbed to death in a downstairs room of her own home in Northcote Road in May 1971. Rose was said to often leave the front door of her cottage wide open. Her death prompted the biggest police probe in the town's history, and despite the attraction of a £1,000 reward, her killer was never identified. Police believed the killer lived in the local area and was shielded by a friend or family member after the murder. They thought the killer broke into her home to steal and repeatedly stabbed her when she challenged him.
So this is actually a bit of guesswork because having trawled through archived newspapers and things, I can't find a picture of the house that Rose lived in, but it has been described as obviously on this road, and it's a cottage which would have been here before the 70s. There is obviously a chance that it's not here anymore, and then there's like a new build that's been put on it, but we're going to just wander down and see if we can maybe try and deduce which one it was, because it's not like the longest road ever.
The person who killed her could be dead by now, but it is still important to find out who it was, added Sylvia. Even now, more than 40 years later, we hope to prompt someone's memory or prick someone's conscience. You never know. The murder was not the only surprise for the couple who are conducting the research for their grandchildren. They also discovered that another family member found someone hanged in their outside toilet, and that a great uncle died on the Titanic.
It's a bit off, I think, to call her a spinster, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but that was more like a technical term, wasn't it, in those days for someone who wasn't married?
It was just if you were of a certain age and you, weren't married, if you were single.
It's a bit like, in John Green's, what they called him, like a not very ambitious man. And
yeah, the wording was quite sloppy, wasn't it? They wouldn't say that nowadays. But wouldn't you assume a cottage would be on its own?
Not necessarily. I'd say that looks like a little bit cottagey.
I would say that's a terraced house, so it was less likely to be.
Maybe one of these.
We felt very uncomfortable filming on this road. We reached the end and then immediately turned back. We all felt like the oldest and most likely house to belong to Rose would have been one of these homes on the right.
It was creepy, that road.
Yeah, it was a little bit.
I did not get great vibes from that
I
street.
don't mind saying that we bailed on that one because there was a man who just sat by us. We reached the end of Northcote Road and people were staring adamantly at us. And when we got to the end, this man came over and just stayed by us, didn't he?
Just sat by
I feel
us.
like he was inhaling suspicious substances.
But he stood for ages, like a foot away from us, just staring, and then sat down on this like sign thing.
Then there was just like a couple like arguing and shouting.
Oh
with
yeah,
each
there
other.
was.
But the number of eyes I felt on us walking down that road, it did
Well,
not
we are
feel...
quite a weird-looking group of
They could
people,
smell
to be
the
fair.
gay on us. Them lot could smell the gay.
Yeah.
Even when we got out of the car, that couple back there were like, she was staring at me as we were walking. I was like...
Basically, we weren't able to fully identify the house where Rose lived. There is a very good chance that it just isn't there anymore because a lot of those houses were either terraced or they seemed a lot more modern.
There was a trio of 3 houses that I guess could be described as cottages, but there's just no way to know for sure.
And I was going to get a shot of that. I think I might have just about got a shot of those, which is the only place where if it was going to be one of those, it would be that one. But then there was 3 women speaking in their driveway, and the second we started walking, they all just shut up and stared, and it just felt like, I don't know, I've never felt so uneasy in my life being in Bournemouth.
There was lots of like flats as well that have been obviously a lot newer.
Yeah,
So
there's a
potential.
chance.
I mean, we've literally walked up and down the old road, so we would have walked past where it happened, regardless of whether
There was nothing that really fit the description of a cottage.
The cottage just seems weird. I mean, again, it might just be antiquated, like the way they called her a spinster. I don't know whether they would refer to something else as that, but we're going to go now. We're going to move on to the next place.
In half a mile, turn right onto Gloucester Road.
We always seem to find all the locations where there are these enormous trees. That's how you know that it's a grim tour spot. So the football stadium is down here?
It's literally at the end of this road.
I have never known where...
Yeah, that's the sign of the football stadium.
Oh, is this right then? Are we going the right way?
Yeah. So this is actually taking us to the mortuary, which is in the cemetery, so...
Creepy. Look at that.
Is this right?
Stadium, yeah.
Our next spot is Bournemouth East Cemetery, which was significantly larger than we realised, so we actually ended up driving to the wrong side to access it properly. We're here to find some of the graves of people who perished in the 1943 air raid, including Kathleen Jeffrey. So specifically, we are looking for a black tombstone. The lady is called Kathleen Jeffrey, so that's the name we want to be looking for. This graveyard is substantially larger than we thought, and also than the one we went to in the last tour. However, just out of the corner of my eye,
I've seen it too.
I think we found where Kathleen is buried. Kathleen Jeffrey, a casualty of war, sadly missed by her daughter and family. I was under the impression she might be buried. I'm told there is a war memorial part of this cemetery that we might have to try and find.
If there is, it's so far in the distance I can't see it.
And I think
at the moment.
war graves often look very similar, don't they? And they're white. So we might have to have a little wander and see if we can find.
And how long have we been in the cemetery? Like, not even 5 minutes. I think that was quicker than we found the last one.
Where we just come through was literally there.
Yeah.
Like, that is pure coincidence.
I've just spotted the name here, Rosemary Sheehan. She passed away in 2018. She was a client of mine and Dad's. We used to do her hair because he owned a salon just like a stone's throw from this cemetery.
Did you know that she passed away?
I can't remember if I knew that or not. 2018. No, I wouldn't have been there anymore, would I? I would have left. I don't remember if I was aware of that or not because we did have quite a few elderly clients, but
You have to tell your dad. Having been walking through the cemetery for a little while, we think we found the war memorial garden surrounded by a hedge. And there's a cross at the west end. Many of these are World War I graves, but we've been led to believe that some are also from World War II. So the War Memorial Cemetery is in that direction, and while there are a lot of servicemen and women buried there who died in World War II, actually none of them died on the day of the bombing of the Metropole, but we did come across the grave of a lady called Florence Ava Hawke, who wasn't in the hotel, but she died in the raid that ended up bombing the Metropole.
Florence Eva, age 41, and it says here, killed by enemy action May 23rd, 1943. And she's buried here with Pamela, age 10, Wendy, age 9, and Peter. What does RN mean?
Royal names, maybe?
19th of February 1952, age 22.
So they're her
In
children.
loving memory of, so it's the whole family, I would assume.
It's actually just dawned on us that all of the graves around here are of people. This lady, Cynthia Hooper, killed with Jack, her dog.
Here, look, he was a commander. Is that? Oh no, it says CQM.
CQMS.
I thought it said COM.
Harold Pethybridge.
What's CQMS?
Killed by enemy action, yeah, 23rd of May. I've never been to a graveyard that big before, have you?
Not in the UK, no.
It was enormous. We were looking around for absolutely ages.
So now we are on our way to Ravenscourt Road, which is a place in Southbourne, where a man named Jamie Devitt murdered a girl called Louise Baker back in 1981.
So we're looking for Ravenscourt Road.
It's a very short road.
Again, this seems like an older part of Bournemouth because, you know, you have all these like, I don't know really, there's the huge trees, but there's all these really kind of like, these older houses here. And everything's very close. The roads are really narrow. So we don't have a specific address. There's no number, like house number listed. Is it?
Left here.
Left here?
Yeah. Oh yeah, is it?
There's no house number listed for where this woman lived. How old was she?
15.
Okay, girl lived,
Right.
but she was attacked on the road and taken to a second location, which we'll get to. But this is the road just here, Ravenscourt Road. It's not very big, is it? It's just this tiny stretch.
Yep.
But you can imagine around here at night, although it's very, very like heavily built up residential
I
area.
don't know, it's very residential. I would have considered this road to be quite a safe road.
I don't know, it seems very kind of...
Yeah, I would have done.
I imagine at night though it would seem very dark.
In 1981, unemployed hotel worker Jamie Devitt, 22, murdered Louise Baker, 15, as she was walking home from a disco to save on bus fare. Devitt surprised Baker and dragged her down an alleyway where he beat and stripped her before strangling her with one of her white socks. Before fleeing, he scrawled the letters number 1 in 3 different colours on her body using makeup pencils from her handbag, before dumping her body in a lavatory in Trinity Methodist Churchyard near her home on Ravenscourt Road, Bournemouth. He then walked back to his lodgings nearby, throwing her clothes away as he went. He was caught 2 days later when he went to a hospital to have his bleeding knuckles tended to. He told police, "I wrote number 1 on her. You know, the number 1 guy. Everybody thinks he's number 1. In prison awaiting trial, he wrote in a letter that, I know what I did was a very nasty crime for which I truly deserve to be locked away for the rest of my life, in jail or elsewhere, without even a second chance. I am sorry, really deeply. I want to be punished really hard." He was sentenced on 20th January 1982 for 20 years, being described by Mr. Justice Stephen Brown at Winchester Crown Court as a savage and brutal killer. I think that's a little bit... Oh, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about him saying something like, I want to be punished really hard. It almost has a bit of a sadistic kind of like...
I don't know. I suppose for doing something so grotesque, you would imagine there would be no remorse, but
Maybe
I don't know if there was.
Could be.
Maybe he was just saying that to sound like he had remorse. It doesn't really sound very genuine.
It is a bit weird. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I guess it does read.
I want to be punished really hard. Like, I don't know, it just sounds a bit like...
sarcastic.
Yeah.
So we'll go to that churchyard. That's not far from here. That's literally about 30 seconds away.
Is it?
Yeah, near her home.
Yeah, no, but I didn't realise it. I thought maybe like, you know...
I don't think it's far away.
I didn't realise it was like...
What's the name of the churchyard where she was found?
Trinity Methodist Churchyard. Apparently she was found near a lavatory.
So we're currently on Ravenscourt Road, and she would have lived in one of these houses, but I mean, to be attacked and then taken, it doesn't say what time of night, but you can imagine, first of all, for no one to notice that she was kind of attacked, and then afterwards to be carried to a churchyard, which is, it's a little bit of a walk, like it's not, I mean, barely.
I mean...
Yeah, but to be carrying a body...
Yeah, but she was... Well, how old was she? 15?
She was 15 and she'd been to a disco. I mean, what kind of time could that possibly be?
It must have been
like
late, but...
It couldn't have been that late. For someone at 15 to be out that late, I'm guessing around in those days, like 9, 10 p.m.
This is the church here.
That's very, very gutsy to do that in... It's not broad daylight, but you know, it's... So there's the church. It's a very... Well, that part there is an extension, isn't it? This is the church.
That's the...
And there's
the graveyard for it.
The churchyard must be around the back. It doesn't look like it's easily accessed.
What about down here?
No, that's a cul-de-sac, so yeah, I don't know. But he was sentenced and he was put away for, how long was it, Shah? 20 years?
Yeah.
There's actually not much information about whether he was released, but I imagine if it was a finite amount of time,
well, he
would have been.
He would have been released in 2002, so that's still 20 years ago. So he's been out the same amount of time that he was locked away for.
Yeah, but there's very little information about where he is now. I think he was put in a prison in Cambridgeshire, but that's, you know, chances of him still living around here
I went to school with someone with the surname Devitt.
Slim to none. Did you?
Yeah.
Didn't you also know someone who was related to the Macintosh Coke killer?
I know someone with...
And in the original Grimm Tour, you thought your auntie's boyfriend killed John Green. So are you just making all this up?
Small town Bournemouth. No, I know one of the guy's surnames or middle names or something. It's a family name. I know one of the guys, and I think the family's quite well known.
You just want to insert yourself, don't you? It's dawned on us as we go to our final stop, which is the Upper Bournemouth Gardens, that we're going to be passing the home of Florence Hawke, where she lived when the air raid came over in 1943, and where she was killed with her kids. So we're gonna go by and see where Florence lived.
Was there 2 younger children?
Yeah. We're just driving through Boscombe. This area here is it the Horseshoe?
No, it's a crescent.
A crescent. And it was a location in Brona Munro's documentary about...
Turn right onto Drummond Road.
About Omar Benguet. Yeah. It's had a very checkered past, Boscombe. It was quite affluent at one point, and it's kind of it's gone through some various kind of changes.
It's got quite a poor reputation, I think, hasn't it?
Yeah, at the moment. I think it's kind of on the up and up. But we're on Drummond Road right now.
If you keep going, I've got 54 in the sat nav.
Okay, so it's on this side.
Yeah.
On your right.
So we're gonna come across 54.
It's just before you get to Hengist Road on your left.
54 Drummond Road.
That one.
Oh, there it is.
Arrive.
There we are. 54A. It looks like it's been split up into flats now. It looks old. Certainly the part of the house on the left, the windows they look very old, don't they?
Mm.
This is what I mean by, like, it's difficult to say because obviously it's got new guttering. So when we were going down Northcote Road, some of those houses could have been a lot older than they appeared to be. But that's where Florence lived. So it's probably from the
it would have been
40s
rebuilt.
Then.
Yeah.
If it was bombed and then rebuilt.
Well,
I'd imagine that was one house.
Yeah, it probably would have been.
Yeah.
Maybe 50s, because I mean it was quite an effort to clear up after the war, wasn't it? It took quite some time to
where she
Things
was.
back.
That's where Florence lived.
Our final stop on the tour is Bournemouth's Upper Gardens to see if we can find the spot where locals have sighted mysterious figures in black coats standing motionless on the bank of the river. We've essentially done a big loop around Bournemouth on this trip, so we've ended up back near Coy Pond. But these unidentified robed figures are only spotted when the sun is setting, so we've kept it till last.
And where are we going?
So we're going to the Upper Gardens. This is more of the mystery, potentially maybe paranormal, not really sure. We're going to discuss a weird sighting that a few locals have had.
What's that flower growing wildly?
I don't know.
There's some wild violets growing here, Shah. What
Yes.
does a violet symbolise?
Says they can symbolise love, honesty, protection, dreams, healing, remembrance, determination, even the idea of setting goals.
Okay. All quite good things then.
Yeah.
So this is Bournemouth Upper Gardens, and there's been a few local stories, sightings of, this is so weird. So apparently there have been at night time 4 figures in long black cloaks with wide brimmed black hats standing spaced apart, maybe a few meters apart, in a line, just ominously at night. There's been a couple of party goers that have been walking home and have spotted them on their way back, and they always seem to be a similar sort of time of year as well. But there was one instance where a witness saw them walking one direction and then came back maybe an hour later and they were gone. So people don't know if maybe they're ghosts, maybe it's a cult situation.
Sounds very culty.
If you walked through here at night and saw 4 men lined up in long black coats with large black hats,
I would have
you wouldn't see your ass for dust.
So nobody got close enough to see if they could hear anything, if they were saying anything, but they were just stood
and there's multiple
in a line.
sightings of these men.
Like top hats or more like...
No, like fedoras, I'm guessing.
Fedoras, yeah, that's
wide brimmed hats.
It sounds quite
weird.
witchy, doesn't it?
In some of the areas, it's quite over... what's it called? It would be quite dark at night. There's quite a lot of cover, trees and stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of coverage here.
So imagine just seeing that, and with the street lamps and stuff, there's one there. Could you imagine seeing that silhouetted in the pitch black? I would absolutely pass away.
And the path leads all the way around.
Such a strange thing to see, and
It is
to
bizarre.
have multiple accounts of it is really strange.
There's
It's
a very
water tower, isn't it?
strange... Is it a water
I
tower?
think it is. I don't think there's anything too
I have
exciting.
never seen that in my life. Yeah, but a water tower for what?
I don't know. Does it produce energy? I don't know. I don't know.
It does look like a water tower, but
They can't be too old, can they? It doesn't look like it's hundreds of years.
well, I wouldn't be surprised if it was 19th century, but they wouldn't have been producing renewable energy then, would they?
What does it say?
Oh, it's very out of the blue. I had no concept this was here before. So where's the plaque?
Door's actually bloody tiny, isn't it?
Oh, what the hell is that? I don't know what that means.
That doesn't look like it's been put there professionally. I wonder if someone's put that there as a memorial,
I don't know.
Without
Go
having
around
to
the
pay
other.
for it.
Go around the other side. But if the water tower is, we're calling it the water tower. We don't really know. And the men we think were seen on the other side of that. But then nobody thinks they would have been facing whatever this building is. So here we are then, this marks the end of the Grim Tour.
2.0.
Part 2. What does everyone think? Did anyone learn anything today?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't know some of those things that we went through today. I've heard some stories, but
yeah,
I didn't know about the tram. I thought that was.
I didn't know about the tram crash.
I don't know what this is. If you know what this structure is for by a river, leave us a little comment, because we have no idea what this is.
I think it's a water tower. I don't think.
But what is a water tower, and what does that mean, and what does it do? You can't answer me that.
The odd thing is, though, there's no way into it, is there? Because that door's not a door; it's just bricked up.
Water towers existed, but they were attached to buildings and they provided water.
And there's windows there, isn't there?
I think my favourite part was learning about Florence, because she wasn't on the original plan. And I think last time we ended up adding something in that we kind of learned on the fly, and seeing where she lived as well. I quite liked that.
I know, I like that a lot of this was centred quite in and around central Bournemouth, wasn't it? Whereas last time we were a little more scattered.
They were outside. That is good, yeah. Same again next year then.
Yeah, right.
That's not a challenge for ruffians and hooligans to go and commit more crimes.
And a special thank you to our brand new patrons Ayana Hazel May, Sapphire Darius, Jason, Morgan Glenister, A Hot Bowl of Soup, Janice Lau, Sam A, Lydia Court, Connor Day and Carly Henderson.